Hey guys, it's Alyssa from So English. I'm really glad that you joined me today for this video. Today I'm going to be talking about lengthening and shortening patterns. So it's a really good kind of skill set to have, regardless of maybe what you think you need or what you don't need. I realized that I really needed to learn for myself how to do both of them. For a long time I felt like I just needed to learn how to lengthen because I liked things longer, but in all reality I need them both for different times and for different patterns. So today I'm going to be going over both of those for you. Today the pattern I specifically chose because it does not have the lengthen shorten line already in it. I wanted to show you how I go about finding that line on it specifically. If your pattern already has that line on it, awesome, that's where you would be going from. But if it doesn't, this is how I do it, and I felt like it was a really nice way to kind of help you along, maybe make you feel more comfortable finding that line for yourself in your pattern. So that's why I chose the pattern I'm using today. Obviously, you can do whatever pattern you want or whatever you're going to use this video for. So some things that you might use lengthening for. Lengthening is one of those things where you could use it for totally different reasons. Sometimes it is maybe your proportions, maybe you're really, really long in the torso, or maybe you are really, really short in the torso, which would be why lengthening and shortening would be a good thing for you. Also, sometimes I generally like my shirts longer than some other people. They like them a little bit more kind of skimming their pants. I like it a little bit more longer than that. So lengthening would be something that I use a lot in my kind of everyday t-shirts that I make. Shortening is one of those things too, where a lot of times when I have a dress that has a bodice and a skirt that matches up to it, I need to shorten that bodice a lot for myself to make sure that that hits me right at my natural waist, because it just gives you that nice little hourglass look to you. So sometimes you want to learn how to lengthen and shorten that so you can get that right, hitting at the right spot for you. So those are kind of some examples on why you would want to use lengthening and shortening. So hopefully you get a lot of this video. I'm really looking forward to this being something that you guys can refer back to whenever you feel like it. So some things that you might need today, and I'll probably repeat myself a few times, so bear with me, but some things that you might want to use or might have with you when you're doing this is you're going to want a measuring tape, obviously, to measure yourself. A straight edge of some sort is also a really good thing to have. Pencil, always a really good option. Don't work in pen, because I notice a lot of times for myself I need to erase a lot or maybe jot some notes down. So those are some good things to have. Some scrap paper is always really good to have for yourself too, because that's kind of what I go off on and when I'm lengthening a pattern, things like that. So those are some things that you are gonna want to have with you when you're lengthening and shortening. So with that, we're gonna move on and let's get started. All right, hey guys, welcome onto this journey we are starting right here. So we're going to be going over lengthening and shortening in this video. So some things that we're going to be needing for this video, if you want to get prepared, things I use for the video. My cat says hello. We're going to be needing, it's always useful to have a measuring tape. I like to use a straight edge ruler. Obviously you're going to need some scissors, tape, some sort of scratch paper that you can fill in on yours, and a pencil. All of those are going to be really useful in doing this. So, obviously your pattern, that's going to be the most important thing to have in this video. So like I said, we're going to be doing lengthening and shortening. The first part of the video is going to be lengthening, and then the second portion I'm going to be showing you how to shorten it. So I'm going to be lengthening the front piece and shortening the back piece just so you can see both of those techniques. Those are both really good things to know how to do. I've had to use both on different patterns for totally different reasons. So it's a really good idea to know how to generally do both. I chose this pattern specifically, one, because it doesn't have the shorten lengthen line, and I thought it would be really useful to show you how I go about lengthening or shortening a pattern piece when it doesn't have that line. Sometimes it can feel really intimidating if it doesn't have that one, because you're just kind of like, oh, where do I go from here? So I'm going to show you how I do it. Second thing is I've actually made this pattern for myself, so I kind of know already how it fits. I always say that it's always a really, really good idea to make a pattern straightforward as it is the first time that you make it. Mostly because how do you really know what you want to modify if you don't know how the basic pattern looks on you? So I always tell people you really should make the pattern as is first before you start doing a whole bunch of modifications to it. So like I said, I've actually made this one for myself before, and when I wore it, I really, really loved it, but I felt like for my personal preference, I wanted it to be a tad bit longer on me. And that's really, again, just because of a personal preference. I tend to like shirts to be a little bit longer on me, kind of covering my bum a little bit more. But I know some people who really like shirts that kind of just barely graze the top of their jeans. So again, neither one of them is right or wrong. It's kind of just what you like personally for you. And then there's also always, if you have a really long torso, or maybe you have a really short torso, that could be something that you need to do for your pattern. So like I said, that's the reason why I chose this one, and I think it'll be really kind of a good way to get you started to see it. Some things and some advice when you're doing your lengthening and shortening. So when I first started sewing, I did, I think, kind of a rookie mistake. Whenever I wanted to lengthen something, I just slapped some inches on the end of it and called it good, and that was the end of the day. Sometimes it worked out just fine. A lot of the times I kept realizing that my shirt didn't really lay right, or maybe it didn't look like how the pattern was depicting it to look like. And that's because of, you're not giving it the right shape still. So have you ever noticed when you buy a pattern, and maybe it does have a shirt length, a tunic length, and a dress length, if you kind of take a look at it, those have different kind of grades to them. Even though it's the same pattern and it's trying to give you the same shape for every length, that kind of curve does need to change a little bit to give you the same sort of structure to it. If I were to just, if I want to shorten my shirt and I just decide, okay, well, I'm going to, take a couple inches off and just go right here and cut that all off, I've already started changing the shape of the shirt. And maybe that's what you want to do. That's totally fine. But if you don't want to do that and you still want the same basic shape, I can't just take it and cut it off from the bottom, because I'm taking away that shape that the pattern wants to give me. And it's the same thing with adding too much length, maybe down to the bottom, because if I add length, it might be too flowy for me now. It might be a lot more because I've given it a little bit more down here. So that's why when you're lengthening and shortening, you're going to want to take it from somewhere up in here, because you're going to still want to give it some length, but keeping that same basic shape that the pattern wants to give you. So for me personally, like I said, I have used this one before, but if you hadn't done it before, I would take the pattern and you would lay it up against you. This is how I did it. I laid it up against me with my shoulder seams matching up in my shoulder. And when I did that, I kind of took a good look at it and where the shirt laid and how much I wanted to add to it. We can all look at it and kind of gesture, I want to give it 2 inches, I want to give it 1 inch, whatever it is for you. And I figured out for myself, I wanted to give me, and I thought the best place to give me some of that length was going to be up in here. Kind of up in the middle where it's just starting to cascade kind of down from your bust line. That's where I wanted to give it to me. I don't want to get it too close up in here into the armpit and into this curve or anything like that. I wanted to give mine the start of this kind of gradual slant right there. So what I did is I took my straight edge, set up on top of it. I can never grab it off the ground. So I took my straight edge and I gave myself a nice line there. So as you can see, there's my line. So what I would want to do if I was lengthening it, so here's a good thing for you to do. If you're ever adjusting a pattern, write your notes on your actual pattern piece. So like I'm going to write on here that I am lengthening, and I'm going to do about 1.5 inches on mine. I always write on my pattern piece what I'm modifying on it, because there's so many times that I go back to it and I know I did something to it, but it's been so long I don't really remember what I did to it. Or I've done a whole bunch of work on the front of my pattern piece to maybe modify it to how I wanted to, and then I go to the other pattern pieces, and I don't remember exactly what I did. So I always say, just write it directly on your pattern. I used to write it on like a tiny little notepad next to me, and I would try to keep it with the patterns, and that didn't last very long because I would always end up losing the notes somewhere. But I realized if I just wrote it directly on the pattern piece, then later on when I went to go pull the pattern out, or if somebody asked me, oh, what did you change on this? Or how much did you shorten that by? And I can go, I don't really remember. So I would go to my pattern piece and pull it out, and oh, okay, well, I lengthened this one by 1.5 inches because it told me so right there. So that's just a kind of a good little tidbit that I like to do that maybe it will help you too. So now that I've done that, I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut right on top of that line. Took me way too long to cut that. I don't know why I was doing that. So now that I have that, I'm gonna move this guy out of the way. So now I have my 2 pieces right here. So this is where it gets a little more tricky. So I'm gonna take my piece of scrap paper, and I always take it and I like to line up my edge to this edge so that they're all kind of uniform. And I will throw a tiny piece of tape on there just so we don't get any shuffling around going on. So I just slap a little bit of tape right there. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to my straight edge. Make sure I'm in focus for you. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to line it up against that pattern piece. Just like that. I pulled it a tiny bit away from the edge just so I can go in. And I will mark 1 inch, and I'm going to mark 1.5 inches. I always mark a couple different places so that I can kind of take a look at it, because maybe I'll go into it starting, oh, I'm going to add 2 inches to it. And then I kind of start doing it, and I'm like, that's kind of a lot. It's kind of a lot of inches. Maybe I should have done a little bit less. Or maybe I think I only need 1 inch, and I look at it and I think, no, I think I need a little bit more. So I like to give myself a couple notches. So now that I've done that, and actually now that I'm looking at it, I think I'm only going to add about 1 inch to this. So what I would do is take this on my, again, straight edge right here. Get that more in view for you. Straight edge against right there. And I'm going to take that to that 1 inch mark there. Make sure I'm nice and even. And I can tell I'm nice and even because on the bottom of my paper is the 11 inches. So I know I'm nice and even. So I'm going to take that and mark that at 1 inch. Okay? So now that I've done that, I'm going to pull that away so you can see. Pick that up. So now I am going to take my bottom pattern piece and I am going to just line that back up. So, dun, 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 like that. And I'm going to take my tape. Go. Just kind of give that a nice stick right there. So this is the beginning of my pattern, just like that. So now, as you can look at it, if I go right in here to connect those two, if I go like that, you're gonna be like, oh, well, those don't line up. Those don't line up at all. And you're right, they don't. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna actually zoom in a little bit closer for you. Here we go. Move you right there. Get a little bit better for you. There you go, that looks better. Okay. You can tell that they kind of don't match. They're a little off because, again, we added that inch to it, which is totally fine. So what I would do now is I would take this, and I kind of played this game where I take that line and go like that, and I take this line and I go like this, kind of curving it like that. So there's my difference that I need to kind of work out for myself on what I'm going to do. So what I will do a lot of times is I kind of start up a little bit higher and I just really lightly brush strokes, lightly, until I find my happy groove of where I'm going to. I think that's looking good. That would be how I personally, there we go. So if you can see that now, that's my new curve for that lengthening. So I'm gonna pull you back out. Ta-da. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna cut this curve. So I'm gonna put a little bit of tape there. Always, always, always tape that. There you go. So I'm gonna take this. I'm just gonna cut out my new curve. There we go. Slide that over here. So right there, if you can take a look at that, that would be my new pattern piece, adding the inch to it. So now it doesn't look too different than it did before, just a little bit longer. So that would be how I personally would lengthen this one. So that's what I'm gonna be doing for that one. Now we're gonna kind of switch over to the shortening part of our video. So just give me 1 second to get all of that gathered up and we'll be right back. All right, hello. So we are back to shortening with our pattern pieces. So like I said before, we're gonna be going over shortening for this half of it now. So maybe shortening is something you would wanna do if you want the shirt to be maybe a little bit shorter on you, to hit you a little bit differently. Maybe you just have a really short torso. So all sorts of things could come involved in why you're shortening. So first things first, what you would do, I'm gonna be starting off with that same line that I made on the front of my pattern piece. Like I said, you always wanna mirror what you did on the front like you did on the back. So I'm gonna put that shorten and lengthen line that I already established for my front. I kind of held them up to each other so that the shorten and lengthen line were in the same place on it. So I was doing the same thing on both of them, even though on this one I'm shortening. But in reality, I wouldn't shorten the front of it or the back of it and then lengthen the other one. So what I'm going to do now, we're gonna be shortening here. So same thing on this one. I'm going to cut right on that line. Okay. So say for this piece, I want to shorten it by an inch. We'll just go with an inch because we went with an inch with the first one too. If I want to shorten it by an inch, I would take this, and you do a measuring tape. I just really like using my straight edge for everything. So I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna lay it right against that edge right there so that I know that I'm straight. I'm gonna mark where an inch is. Really good for myself. Okay, so there's my inch, mark right there. Now, something that you're gonna notice for yourself, depending on where I take that inch out of, the curve will be a little bit different on them. So that is something that you need to kind of look at when you're going through with it, because whichever way you go, you need to stick with it with the other pattern piece because you want the curves to match. So I'm gonna go ahead and do it with my curve kind of taking it out of this bottom half instead of the top half. That's what I'm gonna show you. So now I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna mark that inch in here. Get that. There we go. Okay. So now that I've done that, if you guys can see that, there's my line. It's kind of faint, sorry. So now I'm gonna take this piece. I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna line these up at that line. Da, 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 like that. So now I'm gonna give it a little piece of tape so that my pattern doesn't move. Okay, so now we're getting close, but we kind of had the same issue. I'm gonna zoom in for you. We had before where these don't match. Right there, if you can see that. So they're not really matching. That curve's kind of wonkadoodle over there. So what you can do now, you can get some scratch paper. This is a really big piece of scratch paper for this tiny little job. Or if you don't want to, you could honestly just, when you're cutting this out of your fabric, take it and just follow that curve. You could totally do that. But for the time being, I'm gonna show you how I would actually finish the pattern piece. So I'm gonna rip this piece of paper because I don't need a whole lot. And I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna stick it behind it just like that. Make sure I'm in, okay, good. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just gonna take this, again, let me make sure, yeah. I'm gonna take this and just kind of keep going because literally that's all I need. That is all I need to fix that. Just a little bit, just like that. Like I said, it's not a whole lot. You could have just done this and just cut it out, but for the sake of it, I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna put a little piece of tape there. And then you would just cut your new pattern piece out. Should have taped it up there. Now I'm kind of all over the place. Let me take you back. Take you back. There we go. I'm gonna finish just chopping that off. There we go. And there would be my new pattern piece with it shortened by 1 inch. So as you can tell, it wasn't a whole lot of a curve that I had to add over there, but it was just enough to it. So now I have a complete pattern piece. This would be our shortened pattern piece, and the other one is our lengthened pattern piece. So it's pretty easy once you figure it out how to do it. You can just do it super easily with all of your patterns. So hopefully this was really helpful for you. Hopefully you learned something along the way, and this will be a really good tool to use in the future for whatever you're doing. So I hope you, like I said, I can't wait to see what you guys do with this in the future. Hopefully it was great for you guys as much as it was for me. So hopefully you have a good rest of your day, guys. See you later.